Greetings, fellow conquerors. This is darkfireslide, and welcome to another video. Well, I mean, obviously it's a video, but today I haven't done a newbie-friendly guide in a while, and so I thought to myself, you know, it would be great. Let's talk about war. That's everyone's favorite subject, isn't it? Today we're going to be doing a pre-war checklist. This is a list of things that you should probably do before each war, though this isn't necessarily an exhaustive list. It is a list of what I consider to be the most important things that you should consider before going to a war in EU4. Without further ado, let's begin. Alright, number 1 on our checklist. Know where you want to expand and why. This is, really important. And will the war that you fight, will it be worth the costly investment that a war is going to take on your country? So, for example here, as Hungary, we could expand into Bosnia. However, a couple things about Bosnia. They don't have very good land. Almost all of it is mountain and hills, and a lot of it has pretty low development, like not great development. So the thing is, Bosnia is Catholic, as we can see. And this causes some issues because they might get an alliance with, at least in the past, they used to get alliances with people like France. And so you have to ask yourself, is this land worth expanding to when I may have to end up finding someone like France? Consider this as opposed to someone like Venice, who is going to put up a much bigger fight, but also has much more developed land in better province types, and also the province of Venice itself is a coastal center of trade, which will help you make a lot of money should you be able to capture it. Other things you'll want to consider are whether or not the land that you want to take is within your culture and religion group. Now, as Hungary, no one's in our culture group, but there are a lot of Catholic people around to expand into. Now, expanding into Orthodox provinces, at least they're still in the same religion group, but the culture will still pose some issues. So always consider this when you're expanding. Is the land that you're taking worth expanding into? And we'll be able to ask these questions with the rest of the checklist. Number 2 on our checklist, check the alliances of the nation you wish to attack now that you know which kind of land, where you want to expand and the land you want to take. So Poland has great land, for the most part, but the problem is they're almost always allied to or have a personal union with Lithuania. This makes expanding into them very difficult because you need a rather large alliance in order to attack them. So always look for alliances, things like marches and vassals, and you also want to look for whether or not the nation is guaranteed. This can be done in the war screen itself. Now, unfortunately, I can't go to the war screen because I am Hungary here, and I have a Regency Council. But that being said, in the actual war screen, when you hit declare war, it'll pop up a screen that will show you, hey, these are the people that are going to get involved on each side. And look out in particular for guarantees, because you may miss them over an alliance. Look out for things like Defender of the Faith, because that is an easy one to miss, and you may end up fighting someone like Spain or France when you didn't mean to. And finally, let's see, there's one more that you need to check. Oh yes, the Emperor. And be sure when you're attacking into the Empire that the Emperor isn't going to join in a war against you, because the Emperor is always a co-belligerent, which means that he will be able to drag in all of his allies. So, just always watch out for those things when you're about to declare a war. Alright, number 3, you'll want to check the strength of each individual belligerent. This can be done in the ledger down here in the bottom right. I'll mouse over it for a little bit so you can see. If you don't know, if you've never seen the ledger, well, welcome to the ledger. Here you can open this, and you'll want to go to your military section of the ledger, because this ledger, by the way, has a comprehensive list of information about pretty much every country and your own nation, economy, trade, etc. But what we want to do when we're going to war is go to the military section of the ledger and go to Armies. Now you can sort these by number of troops, artillery, manpower, force limit, etc. I find it most useful to sort it by name, just so you can go to the nation that you actually want to go. As we can see, a nation like Austria has a total of 38,000 troops. This total value here is going to be how many total troops that they have. I know it sounds simple, but it's the combined of all their infantry, cavalry, and artillery. It's also useful because this shows the amount of manpower your enemy has and their potential force limit. Because sometimes nations don't always build up to their force limit, but they could during a war, and that would be dangerous. So, on top of that, you want to look at this and look at every nation that you're about to fight. So let's go look at Poland here, because we were talking about, well, their land's good, but it might be problematic expanding into them. So if you look at Poland's army, they've only got 22,000 troops. So that sounds feasible. That sounds like beatable, right? They have a force limit of 30, and their manpower is only 6,000, which is kind of not that great. But if we look at their ally, Lithuania, we can see that they have an additional 21,000 troops and 7,700 manpower. So total, we're looking at fighting about 40,000-ish troops, and they could build up to even more. And despite their manpower, these are fairly big, wealthy nations, which means that they could build potentially mercenaries if we get into a prolonged conflict with them. So these are things that you want to consider when you're about to attack. Consider the potential strength of everyone involved, especially if you're not sure that you could win the war just based on your country's size or not. Because the thing is, even a one-province minor, like, look at Frankfurt here. Frankfurt here has one province. They are a free city in the Holy Roman Empire. They can still bring to bear 6,000 troops. So if somebody is allied with 4 one-province minors, that's an additional 24,000 troops that you might have to fight. So it's very important to look up the strength of each party involved to see if you can actually win the war. After this, you'll want to check the national ideas. Now, we haven't unlocked any ideas, but if you go to the diplomacy screen here and you mouse over the little light bulb, it will tell you what the enemy's traditions are and what national ideas they've unlocked, as well as the actual idea groups that they're taking and how far they've progressed into those ideas. This can be very important for things like defensive ideas, where having the second idea gives you a massive morale bonus that could, potentially beat you as the player. So you'll always want to look out for that. Another thing that you'll want to consider doing, and this is more for the actual fighting, you'll want to look for things in battle, like seeing like what your relative discipline is to the average opponent, what your relative morale is to the average opponent, and see for yourself, hey, what am I up against when I'm fighting these battles? So, just more things to consider on our checklist here. Alright, number 4 on our checklist, we want to check the relative military tech level compared to our opponents. Now, at the start of the game here, we're all at military tech 3, but as we all know, this does not stay the same forever, and often, some nations have a better military technology level than others. In general, you never want to fight an opponent that has a higher military tech level than you, just in general. However, there are exceptions to the rule because not all techs are equal in military tech. In the early game, however, this is when it's the most important. The most important techs that you'll want to watch out for are Tech 4, since Tech 4 gives a morale and tactics advantage. Both of which are massive at this point in the game. If you have a Tech 4 advantage over a Tech 3 opponent, it is usually fairly easy to defeat their armies most of the time, unless they just completely, vastly outnumber you. So that is an important tech to leverage. Tech 6 is important because it raises your military tactics level. Military tactics reduces the amount of damage taken. So if you have a Tech 6 advantage over an opponent, you are going to take less damage, and thus it is easier to win the war. Tactics also goes up at Tech 7, 9, and 12, and so these are also important techs to consider. Finally, Military Tech 15 gives you a +1 to your morale, and if you have a Military Tech 15 advantage over another opponent, it is very, very likely that you're going to win the battle, hands down, most of the time. Of course, barring that the enemy outnumbers you by a ridiculous margin. So always check your military tech levels before you go into battle. It is really important, and that alone can help determine wars even more than the most carefully picked ideas. Number 5 on our checklist, know your casus belli. Know what your cause of war is going to be and what your plan is to do that. So, for example, it may not be the best idea to declare a holy war on the Ottomans because you will need to win 10% of war score from battles. What you may instead wish to do is declare a conquest war and then take the province that you claimed, since that is the point of the conquest war. In either case, it's important to know that the reason that you're going to war and how that's going to help you win the war and take land. Sometimes it is easier to take a province than it is to win battles, and in the case of the imperialism casus belli, sometimes it can be very difficult to take a capital, which is the war goal of an imperialism casus belli. So that's just something to consider as you are getting ready for war. Number 6, check your manpower. Know how much manpower you have going into the war. If you don't have a lot of manpower left, do you have the money to buy mercenaries to win the war? If you are besieging a lot of provinces, is it in a tropical environment, or is it in a lot of grassland where attrition isn't really going to be a problem? If you're fighting in Russia, attrition is going to be a problem. If you're fighting in the jungle, attrition is going to be a problem. And so, you'll need to have more manpower or have the money to afford replacing mercenaries. So this is just something else to consider before you go to war. Number 7, and this is a pretty simple one, check the amount of administrative points that you have. In general, it's good to stockpile about 150 to 200 points before you go to war, because the last thing that you want when you take land from somebody is to not have any admin points. This is because overextension, when you take provinces, is dangerous to your country, and not being able to core it immediately means that you're going to have to deal with overextension even longer than usual, including all of the horrible things such as, corruption and national unrest. As well as the other effects of having overextension, which are not great. And really, that's it for our pre-war checklist. I hope to make the video shorter than this, but I still think it's a pretty good length. But with these tips, you can now prepare to march to war, knowing full well what your odds are and what you stand to gain from winning or losing. March forth and ride to victory. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to give a like and leave a comment. And if you have any other pre-war tips you'd like to add, go ahead and leave a comment. Subscribe to see more EU4 paradox and strategy content in the future. Until next time, Godspeed, you brave souls.